On a normal Friday morning in June 2010, a 7-year-old walked into his elementary school with his stepmom, excited to show off his science fair project. Within an hour, he was gone. No witnesses, no confirmed sightings, and no clear trail. To this day, no one can say for certain what happened inside that school. This is the case of Kyron Horman, one of the most baffling and heartbreaking missing child cases in the United States. Despite national news coverage and the largest search effort in Oregon history, investigators have never found Kyron or the answers his family has been begging for. Over the years, the investigation has grown into a complex web of timelines, conflicting statements, intense public scrutiny, and unanswered questions that continue to divide the community and the country. In today's episode, we're going to walk through the full timeline of June 4th, the investigation that followed, the theories that have emerged, and where the case stands today. I'm Amanda, and this is Their Voice Matters, where we explore true crime stories with clarity and care, giving a voice to those who can't speak for themselves. If you'd like to help keep stories like this alive, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel or follow the podcast. It really helps more people discover stories just like this one. Before we discuss the events of June 4th, 2010, it's important to understand the family that Kyron was born into and the relationships that shaped his early life. Kane and Desiree married in 2000. The couple lived in Portland, Oregon. Their relationship struggled early on, and although they had initially planned to separate, they decided to continue the marriage when Desiree became pregnant. By August 2002, 8 months into her pregnancy with Kyron, Desiree filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. There have also been long-standing rumors about exactly when the relationship between Kane and Terry began. Some reports claim Kane was unfaithful during Desiree's pregnancy, while others, including Kane, say that although he and Desiree were still living in the same home, their relationship had already ended, and the romantic connection with Terry began afterward. However, Desiree has said, quote, "Unfortunately, Kane was not faithful to me and met another woman." Kane has denied this version of events. What is clear is that the end of Kane and Desiree's marriage was emotionally complicated, and Terry was part of their lives before Kyron was born. Kyron was born on September 9th, 2002, and the divorce became official in February 2003. After the divorce, Kane and Desiree shared custody, with Kyron primarily living with Desiree. That changed in 2004 when Desiree suffered kidney failure and traveled to Canada for medical treatment. During that time, Kyron moved in full-time with Kane, who was working as a software engineer at Intel. 2 months later, Desiree returned to Oregon and began recovering while managing extensive medical debt. She moved in with family in Medford, about 4.5 hours south of Portland. Even though Kyron remained with Kane, Desiree stayed actively involved in his life, meeting Kane and Terry halfway between their cities for regular visits. She eventually remarried a police detective, Tony Young. Terry earned her bachelor's degree in 2000 and worked as a substitute teacher in Portland area elementary schools. When Desiree went to Canada for medical treatment, Terry moved in with Kane to help raise Kyron. She stopped teaching but continued her education, completing a master's degree in education in 2004. Terry also had an older son from a previous marriage, a teenager at the time, who lived with the family before moving to Roseburg, Oregon in 2010 to live with his grandparents and then later his father. Friends, relatives, and even her ex-husband described Terry as a focused and attentive parent. According to Terry's mother, Carol, quote, "Terry has raised Kyron. She's been with him since he was an infant." Desiree herself even acknowledged the role Terry played in Kyron's life, saying, quote, "I wouldn't say she would replace me, obviously, but she definitely gave him what he needed." Terry was active on Facebook, often sharing photos of the children and updates about their lives. She regularly emailed friends with stories about Kyron and her family's day-to-day activities. Kane and Terry married in April 2007 in Hawaii. For Mother's Day that year, Kane gifted Terry a candy apple red Ford Mustang GT. She personalized it with the license plate RDS-QRL, short for Red Squirrel, a nickname referring to her striking red hair. In November 2008, the couple welcomed a daughter. Because she's a minor, I'll simply be referring to her as the baby, or Kane and Terry's daughter, throughout this episode. By most accounts, the family appeared close. They played board games, went bowling, visited the zoo, took vacations, and were active in Kyron's school life. Terry frequently volunteered at Skyline Elementary and took Kyron and her older son to swimming lessons. In the spring of 2010, Kyron was wrapping up second grade at Skyline Elementary. He loved learning, especially anything related to science or math, and he was always eager to share new facts with anyone who would listen. Desiree described him as quiet but incredibly bright, a child who absorbed information like a sponge. He was known for his contagious laugh and gentle personality. The family had several summer trips planned that year, and Kyron was excited for all of them. By all accounts, he was a happy 7-year-old looking forward to school ending and a fun summer ahead. By early June 2010, life for Kyron and his family felt ordinary. School routines, summer plans, and the excitement of the upcoming science fair. But even the most seemingly normal days can hinge on a single moment. The morning of June 4th began like any other, except for the added excitement of the school science fair, and with a project Kyron had been working very hard on. Kane later recalled saying goodbye to his son that morning, saying, quote, "I just told him I was really proud of all the effort he put in on his project. He did a really great job," and gave him a big hug. Kane left for his job at Intel at around 7:45 a.m. Normally, Kyron rode the bus to and from school, but because Terry planned to attend the science fair that morning, she drove him and the 18-month-old baby in the family's white Ford F-250, rather than her red Mustang that she reportedly normally drove. Skyline Elementary opened at 8 a.m., and they arrived shortly after. Terry was a familiar presence at Skyline. She volunteered frequently and communicated often with Kyron's teacher, Miss Porter. Kyron dropped off his coat and backpack in his classroom, and then he and Terry headed to the science fair displays. Kyron's project was a diorama titled The Red Eye Tree Frog. Kyron and Terry were seen by the PTA president around 8:15 a.m. at his display. Terry took the well-known photo of Kyron smiling proudly next to his project. According to Kyron's grandmother, Carol, quote, "He was excited about his science project. They had worked on it together. He was anxious to take it to school and show it off." Kyron and Terry walked the halls, looking at other exhibits, and Kyron chatted with classmates. They were seen by Miss Porter in his classroom before 8:45 a.m. and by at least one other teacher in another classroom looking at exhibits. This was an unusually busy day. Estimates say there were an additional 300 people at Skyline for the science fair. At 8:45 a.m., the morning bell rang. Students were supposed to head to their classrooms for attendance, while families wrapped up their visits and left the building. Miss Porter noticed that Kyron wasn't in the classroom during roll call. Believing he had left with Terry for a doctor's appointment, she marked him absent at some point that day. No phone call was made to the parents at any point to confirm. Much of Terry's detailed account of that morning has not been publicly verified by investigators. Because of that, I'll go through her claimed timeline later. But for now, we're sticking to the events that are publicly verified. At 1:21 p.m., Terry posted the science fair photos, including Kyron's final photo, to Facebook. Around 2 p.m., Kane returned home from work. He said Terry was on her computer, and she showed him the photos from the morning. Nothing seemed unusual. Kane said, quote, "She showed me the photos of Kyron really quick. I went and found the baby and gave her a hug, grabbed something to eat." At 3:30 p.m., Kane, Terry, and the baby walked to the bus stop expecting to meet Kyron. But when the bus door opened, the bus driver said Kyron hadn't gotten on the bus. Was there a mix-up? Did someone assume that he was being picked up because Terry had driven him in that morning? There are conflicting accounts about who called the school at that point. Some reports say it was the bus driver, while others say it was Terry. Either way, the school was contacted, and the secretary said that Kyron had been marked absent. Panic set in. Kane and Terry rushed to Skyline. Kyron wasn't there, and staff told them that he had not been at school and no one had seen him since the science fair that morning. Desiree later recalled the moment she got the call from the school's secretary no parent ever wants to receive. She said, quote, "Is this Desiree Young? You're listed as the emergency notification for Kyron. I have to notify you, he's missing." For a split second, I thought it was a joke. I said, "I don't understand. How could he be missing?" She immediately called Terry, who told her that everything had seemed normal that morning. Desiree said, quote, "She said they went to the science fair and everything was fine, and she waved goodbye to him, and he went into his class, or so she thought." The school secretary dialed 911 to report that Kyron was missing. Meanwhile, Desiree and Tony got in their car and began the 4.5-hour drive from Medford to Portland. Once Skyline Elementary reported Kyron missing on the afternoon of June 4th, the response was fast. Within minutes of the 911 call, Portland police and the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office were dispatched to both the school and the Horman home. By early evening, officers had searched Skyline from top to bottom: classrooms, crawl spaces, storage areas, outbuildings, as well as the surrounding grounds and the family home. The school did not have surveillance cameras, which made it much harder to reconstruct Kyron's movements after the science fair. A robocall went out to all Portland public school families that evening, letting them know that Kyron had not come home. Search and rescue teams were activated, and by nightfall, professional searchers and specialized volunteer groups were on the scene. The sheriff personally contacted the FBI, and Kyron's photo was pushed out to local media. The overnight search continued into Saturday. Over the next several days, the response escalated into what would become the largest and most expensive search and rescue effort in Oregon history. Local, county, state, and federal agencies joined in, including the FBI, the National Guard, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office. Hundreds of trained searchers and multiple canine teams combed the steep, forested terrain around Skyline. Helicopters were brought in to conduct aerial searches, and dive teams were brought in to check nearby waterways. By that first weekend, the search radius included a 2-mile area around the school and later expanded to parts of Sauvie Island, about 6 miles away. At the same time, detectives began interviewing Skyline students, staff, and parents. Around 300 students and their families returned to the school to speak with investigators. A dedicated tip line was set up, a Facebook page was created to share updates, and missing persons flyers with Kyron's photo began circulating widely. At this stage, the sheriff's department said that Kyron's disappearance was a missing endangered child case, but didn't call it an abduction. After about 10 days of intense searching, the sheriff's office announced that the large-scale ground search was being scaled back, and that Kyron's disappearance was now being treated as a criminal investigation. By that point, more than 1,300 searchers from Oregon, Washington State, and Northern California had participated. The search had included Skyline, surrounding rural areas, and parts of Sauvie Island, and billboards with Kyron's picture went up around the Portland metro area in multiple languages. Captain Mike Schultz with the sheriff's office addressed criticism that the family wasn't out searching with volunteers. He explained that investigators had specifically asked them to stay close and maintain contact, so detectives could quickly check details, follow up on leads, and verify information. He also said they encouraged the family to maintain some normal routines, including going to the store or gym to cope with the stress and stay mentally and physically functional for what they knew could be a long investigation. On June 11th, for the first time, Kyron's family appeared together at a news conference. Up until then, the parents and step-parents had remained out of public view, but on this day they stepped forward as a united group. Tony Young said, quote, "Kyron, we miss you, we love you, and we need you home right now." Kane added, quote, "Please help us bring Kyron home." It was a moment of shared purpose. 4 adults standing together, focused entirely on finding Kyron. But in the days that followed, that united front began to fracture. As new allegations surfaced and tensions rose inside the investigation, the relationships within Kyron's blended family shifted dramatically. Later in June 2010, Kane moved out of the home with the couple's daughter, obtained a restraining order against Terry, and filed for divorce. Terry hired a defense attorney, and shortly after, she left the family home so that Kane and their daughter could return. Those family court actions were separate from the criminal investigation, but they became part of the broader public narrative surrounding the case. We'll discuss much more about all of this shortly. In the summer of 2010, a Multnomah County grand jury was convened to hear testimony related to Kyron's disappearance. Witnesses included Kyron's parents and step-parents, friends of Terry, the school principal, and others connected to Skyline Elementary. A grand jury in this context is not a trial. It's a tool to take testimony under oath and evaluate whether there is enough evidence to support potential charges. To date, no criminal charges have ever resulted from that process. Even after the organized search was scaled down, targeted operations continued. Dive teams searched portions of Sauvie Island and nearby channels. Searchers returned multiple times to rural and wooded areas along Northwest Skyline Boulevard and other logging and backcountry roads. Search operations picked back up periodically through late 2010 and into 2011 as new tips or investigative leads came in. Nothing publicly confirmed as evidence of Kyron was ever found. As time went on, the active task force was eventually reduced from dozens of detectives to a smaller core team, though the sheriff's office and FBI maintained that the case was still open. In 2012, Kyron's mother, Desiree, filed a civil lawsuit against Terry, seeking $10 million in damages and alleging that Terry knew what happened to Kyron. The case was delayed because of the ongoing criminal investigation, and in 2013, Desiree withdrew the suit, saying she didn't want to interfere with law enforcement's work. The withdrawal didn't mean her beliefs had changed, only that she chose not to pursue the civil case while the criminal investigation remained active. By 2014, the public-facing investigation had grown quieter. The massive searches were over. There were no arrests, no publicly identified suspects, and no confirmed sightings of Kyron. That's the point where this case truly becomes what most people know it as today, a case with more questions than answers, and one where much of what the public believes comes from partial information, sealed records, and years of speculation. Over the years, several theories have circulated, some simple and others much more complex. Here are the most widely discussed possibilities. Theory 1, Kyron wandered off. Some early speculation centered on whether Kyron might have simply walked away from the school and gotten lost. Terry's mother described Kyron as, quote, "a little bit dreamy. He's a sweet kid. He gets distracted. He's your typical second grader," but said he's also timid and cautious, saying, quote, "he's not real adventurous. He won't get out of sight of the house. He's pretty insecure about that, so I can't see him wandering off." Others who knew him echoed that it was unlike Kyron to wander off on his own. The terrain surrounding Skyline Elementary is extremely challenging. Thick brush, dense forests, and waterways. All of these areas were searched repeatedly by hundreds of trained ground searchers, several scent and cadaver dogs, helicopters, and specialized water search units. The school building itself was also searched top to bottom, including crawl spaces, closets, and unused areas. Given the scale and thoroughness of these searches, investigators have consistently stated that if Kyron had simply wandered off and became lost or injured, they would expect that at least some trace would have been found in the last 15 years. No evidence has ever surfaced to support this theory. Theory 2, stranger or opportunistic abduction. Another early question was whether Kyron may have been abducted, either by a stranger or by someone unknown to his family. Initially, law enforcement said they had no evidence of a kidnapping, and the circumstances made a stranger abduction challenging. June 4th was an unusually busy day at Skyline. An estimated 500 people were on campus for the science fair, creating an extremely high-risk environment for anyone to lure or carry off a child unnoticed. Former Multnomah County Chief Deputy District Attorney Norm Frank later said he doubted the disappearance was spontaneous. He believed an abductor would have needed some knowledge of the unusual schedule that day, the heavy crowd, and the brief window before Kyron was marked as absent. This suggested planning rather than a random opportunity. Still, some argue that the sheer number of people at the school could have allowed someone to blend in, especially if they looked like a parent, volunteer, or school employee. No school staff member was reported missing or unaccounted for, and no one out of place at the school was reported. A true stranger abduction remains possible in theory, but investigators have never announced evidence supporting it, and the chaotic environment makes it difficult to imagine someone completely unknown to the school navigating the campus undetected. Theory 3, Terry was involved in Kyron's disappearance. Within the first several weeks of the investigation, public attention and eventually much of the investigative focus shifted toward Kyron's stepmother, Terry Horman. It's important to note that she has never been named a suspect or person of interest by law enforcement. Still, a number of events, statements, and allegations led many people to speculate about her involvement. In this section, we're going to look at what those concerns are, what Terry has said, and what remains unconfirmed. Terry has shared her own account of the morning of June 4th. Much of this timeline has not been publicly confirmed by investigators, so this is presented as her version of events, not as established fact. Terry says she arrived at Skyline Elementary with Kyron and her baby daughter around 8:15 a.m. They went to Kyron's classroom, returned library books, were seen by the PTA president, and walked through the science fair displays. She took the well-known photo of Kyron standing beside his project during this time. She later said that she learned Thursday, June 3rd, was the presentation day, and only after the fact realized that students had actually done their presentations the previous day, not on Friday. Terry said that after the fair, Kyron wanted to stop by his kindergarten and first grade teacher's room on the lower level. When the bell rang, he and Terry raced to the second floor where his classroom was, using different staircases, something she said they often did. Terry said she had the baby and the diaper bag, so Kyron always won. According to her account, she stood in the upstairs hallway near the stairs and watched Kyron walk toward his classroom. She says she last saw the back of his head as he reached the doorway. Terry said then she left the school. According to Terry, Kyron was seen by the school secretary and by another student in the hallway after she left the building. There was also an account from one of Kyron's classmates that he reported seeing Terry leave the school without Kyron. However, some early reports suggested that Terry and Kyron may have been seen leaving the school together. None of the sightings have ever been confirmed by investigators. Former Deputy DA Norm Frank said about the eyewitness statements, quote, "My recollection is that we didn't have any credible witnesses that was sure about that. If we had a single credible witness who was positive of that, that would have enhanced the case much more than the state of the evidence we were presented with." Because Skyline Elementary didn't have surveillance cameras at the time, and because eyewitness recollections from a crowded event can be inconsistent, the exact sequence of who saw what and when has never been definitively established. Terry says she left the school around 8:45 a.m. and spent the next several hours running errands with her daughter. Around 9 a.m., she said she went to a Fred Meyer grocery store in Hillsborough to look for medication for the baby, but was reportedly told it wasn't in stock. Around 10 a.m., she went to another Fred Meyer in Beaverton, where she ran into a gym acquaintance named Andrea Leckie, who recalled Terry showing her the science fair photo of Kyron. Andrea said, quote, "The only thing that I think was significant about that time is that she showed me a picture of Kyron next to his project. I think the thing that seems odd about it, perhaps, is that we were just passing each other by, and in a few seconds, with her daughter being sick in her arms, made a point to show me the picture." After the stores, Terry said she went to the gym for an hour. Then she said she returned home around 12:45 p.m. Detectives later reviewed store surveillance and checked for receipts. They have not publicly said what portions of her account they were able to verify. Kyron's mother, Desiree, has said that Terry was unable to explain roughly 2 hours of her morning. Terry says that time was spent dealing with a fussy baby, parking to rock her to sleep, and then driving around to keep her asleep. No public records confirm or contradict this version. One of the earliest points of confusion in this case involves a doctor's appointment that Kyron's teacher believed he had on June 4th. Because of that assumption, she didn't find it unusual that Kyron was at the science fair, but later absent when class started. Kyron did not have an appointment that morning. Terry has said she told the teacher about a doctor's appointment for the following week, believed to be Friday, June 11th. School calendars show that June 10th was the last day of school, meaning that June 11th would have been a day off, and a much more likely time for a doctor's appointment. Terry has said she mentioned the appointment because she was worried Kyron might be experiencing petit mal or absence seizures. As she said, he seemed to be confused and having memory issues. So she asked the teacher to keep an eye out for some of the behaviors she'd noticed at home. In a TV segment aired in late July 2010, retired Multnomah County Sheriff's Office Captain Bruce McCain said Terry's explanation didn't make sense because June 4th was, quote, the last day of school. But that detail was incorrect and illustrates how many early assumptions entered public conversation before they were confirmed. With about 500 people on campus for the science fair, roughly 300 more than usual, it's possible a conversation about next week's appointment was misheard or misunderstood. Terry maintains she did not tell the teacher that the appointment was that morning. Law enforcement has never publicly confirmed exactly what Terry told the teacher about a doctor's appointment, whether the teacher misunderstood what she was told or whether the appointment existed at all. Some believe it could have been a deliberate excuse, meant to delay concern about Kyron's absence. Others believe it could have been a simple miscommunication on a chaotic day. Another point of speculation centers on the vehicle that Terry drove that morning. Instead of her usual red Mustang, which she reportedly drove most days, she took the family's white Ford F-250 to the science fair. Some have suggested she used the larger truck because Kyron's project was big. However, there are conflicting accounts about when the project was actually brought to school. If the presentation portion of the science fair happened on Thursday, as Terry later said, it would make sense that the project may have already been at school that day. In that case, unless there was a reason to bring it home and return it on Friday, the project may not have needed transportation that morning. This uncertainty has raised a common question online. If the project was already at school on Friday, why take the truck at all? Some have suggested that it's because a white truck is less noticeable than a red Mustang, but that is just speculation. By June 18th, 2 weeks after Kyron vanished, investigators released a flyer asking whether anyone had seen Terry that morning, the white Ford F-250, or anyone in or around the truck between 8:15 and 8:45 a.m. Investigators also said that witnesses reported seeing someone near the truck while Terry was inside the school at the science fair. Terry has addressed those claims, and she completely denied it, saying the only passengers were Kyron and the baby on the way to school, and then only the baby when she left. It has never been clarified who the witness or witnesses were, or whether any of these sightings were confirmed. Investigators also asked the public whether they saw Terry driving the truck between 10:15 and 11:30 a.m. along Northwest Springville Road, Northwest Skyline Boulevard, Springville to Newberry Road, or along Old Germantown and Germantown roads. This suggests authorities were trying to narrow down her movements during the window between leaving the school and returning home, but no findings from these requests have been released publicly. One of the most serious allegations tied to this theory came from a landscaper who occasionally worked on the family's property. A landscaper Kane didn't know that Terry had hired. In the weeks after Kyron disappeared, while investigators were interviewing anyone connected to the family, the landscaper told them that 6 to 7 months earlier, Terry had allegedly approached him about killing Kane. According to reports, the landscaper said Terry asked him to meet her at a restaurant with the baby in tow and asked him to, quote, get rid of Kane. He claimed Terry told him that Kane was harming her, that she feared he would take custody of their daughter if they divorced, and that Kane often carried large amounts of cash, making it possible to stage his death as a robbery. Because of the seriousness of the allegation, investigators arranged an undercover operation on June 26, 2010. The landscaper, wearing a wire, met with Terry and an undercover officer posing as an associate. The meeting reportedly ended quickly when Terry did not engage in the conversation. That same day, once detectives informed Kane of the landscaper's claim, he left the home with their 19-month-old daughter and filed for a restraining order, divorce, and temporary custody. Investigators also briefed Desiree and Tony, which led to all three parents publicly distancing themselves from Terry. Terry has repeatedly denied ever soliciting anyone to harm Kane. In later interviews, she described her interaction with the landscaper very differently. Terry claimed she had no relationship with him beyond occasional yard work. She paid him privately because Kane expected her teenage son to handle the yard care, which was too much for him. She didn't tell Kane about hiring him because she believed he would be upset. She felt uncomfortable during a Mother's Day encounter, just weeks before Kyron disappeared, alleging that the landscaper hugged and kissed her in a way that made her very uncomfortable. She believed he may have fabricated the murder-for-hire plot when she rejected his advances. None of these claims have ever been independently confirmed. Several parts of the story remain unclear. Investigators have never released the undercover recording or transcript. Law enforcement have not publicly shared any physical or documented evidence that supports the murder-for-hire claim. The landscaper didn't report the alleged solicitation at the time, only after Kyron disappeared. Terry has consistently denied the allegation. The man's motives, whether concern, misunderstanding, or misrepresentation, have never been established. No charges have ever resulted from the landscaper's statement. However, the accusation has had a major impact on public opinion and played a significant role in the rapid breakdown of Terry and Kane's marriage in the weeks following Kyron's disappearance. Alongside the landscaper allegation, Kyron's parents have also said they believe Terry harbored negative feelings toward both Kane and Kyron. These statements added to their suspicion about her potential involvement. Desiree said that she was shown messages that allegedly demonstrated that Terry hated Kyron. She has repeated this claim in interviews, saying she came to believe that Terry was capable of hurting him. Kane has also said, quote, "I know of the hatred she had for both of us." The messages they described haven't been released publicly, and investigators haven't publicly confirmed their existence or content. Terry has strongly denied these claims. In interviews, she has said she never wrote any hateful messages about Kyron, that no such texts or emails exist, and that they, quote, can't produce one iota of evidence. Terry has emphasized that she considered Kyron her son, saying, quote, in every sense of the word, he's my son. She has also maintained that Kyron called her mom, while he called Desiree Medford mom, explaining that she was his primary caregiver from the time he was a toddler. In interviews, Desiree has said that Terry asked her to take custody of Kyron, though Terry denies this. Terry said that Kyron once said he wanted to live with Desiree, and that she encouraged him to talk to Kane and Desiree if he felt strongly about it. Terry has also stated that years earlier, she contacted an attorney about adopting Kyron, but was told she couldn't do so because Desiree was his biological mother and had parental rights. No emails or texts showing Terry expressing hatred toward Kyron have been released publicly. However, Desiree has stated that she was shown those messages, so it's possible that certain communications were reviewed by the family but were never made public. Another person drawn into the investigation was Dee Dee Spicer, a close friend of Terry's. Dee Dee became a major focus for detectives in the weeks after Kyron disappeared. Detectives reportedly served a search warrant on Dee Dee's condominium and interviewed multiple people who had contact with her on June 4th. At the time, Dee Dee was doing gardening work at a large 40-acre property on Old Germantown Road, a rural area roughly 5 miles from Skyline Elementary. Investigators learned that she arrived at the property around 9 a.m. Coworkers reported that she was not seen between approximately 11:30 a.m. and 1 p.m., and they'd believed she left the property. When the homeowner and another coworker called her for lunch, she allegedly did not answer her phone. Because this window overlaps with the time Kyron went missing, detectives wanted to understand her whereabouts more clearly. Searchers and investigators looked for any sign of Kyron near Old Germantown Road and areas near where Dee Dee Spicer had been working. If they found anything, it wasn't shared publicly. While investigators reported that Dee Dee left the property for a period of time, she said that she never actually left the property at all that day. Law enforcement hasn't clarified whether Dee Dee was actually seen leaving the property or if she just wasn't seen on the property. After Kane moved out with their daughter and filed for divorce, Dee Dee stayed with Terry for 11 days, from late June into early July. Terry's parents had returned home, and Dee Dee said they asked her to stay and support Terry. Dee Dee later said that Terry was devastated, often looking through photos and drawings from Kyron and her daughter, and that she believed her friend was terrified and grieving. During this same period, Kane, Desiree, and Tony released a statement, urging Dee Dee to cooperate, saying they believed she was hampering the investigation. Dee Dee's attorney strongly rejected that assertion and disputed any claims that she was uncooperative, stating she met with detectives for 3.5 hours, participated in additional follow-up conversations, and, quote, cooperated fully. He also denied allegations that she urged others to not cooperate with investigators. Although it's important to note that in a later deposition, anytime Dee Dee was asked about Terry, she would refuse to answer, pleading the fifth. Former Deputy DA Norm Frink later said that investigators considered whether Dee Dee might have been involved as a secondary figure. He explained that authorities even offered her immunity, meaning she could not be prosecuted for any crime related to the case if she provided information. According to Frink, whatever information she shared did not move the investigation forward. Dee Dee said, quote, "They wanted me to tell them that Terry did it, or that Terry knew something. I told them everything I knew, over and over again, but I didn't tell them what they wanted to hear." Some experts interviewed at the time noted that investigators often look closely at friends and the inner circle of someone they're focusing on. Jack Levin, a criminology professor, said the attention on Terry's friends could indicate either investigators believed Terry was involved and may have had help, or they were, quote, grasping at straws in the absence of direct evidence. He also noted that it's not unusual for close friends to assist someone who is under intense public scrutiny, especially if that person has not been charged. Dee Dee has never been arrested or charged in connection to the case. Her involvement in the investigation appears to stem from her proximity to Terry, an unexplained period during the key window of time, and concerns from Kyron's parents about her influence and support. One point of controversy in this case involves Terry's cell phone activity on the morning of June 4th. Kyron's parents have said that investigators told them Terry's phone records didn't perfectly match the locations she described that morning. However, law enforcement hasn't publicly confirmed what these discrepancies may be. There's also a widely repeated claim that Terry's phone pinged on Sauvie Island, a nearby location heavily searched in the early investigation. But Terry has strongly denied that, and several details support that this claim may be misunderstood. There is no cell phone tower on Sauvie Island. There's also a camera that takes a photo of all the license plates crossing the bridge onto Sauvie Island. Law enforcement have never produced any evidence that Terry's vehicle crossed the only bridge onto the island. Terry explained that Highway 30, which she admitted to driving on, runs parallel to the island, which might explain why her phone pinged near there. She stated firmly, quote, "I was never on Sauvie Island." At this point, there is no publicly released investigative evidence showing her phone or vehicle was actually on Sauvie Island that morning. What's known is that investigators reviewed Terry's cell phone pings as part of the case. What those records showed, if anything, has never been made public. There's also a burner phone conversation that gets mixed into the theories about June 4th. But according to available reporting, these phones were purchased after Kyron disappeared, not before. Here's what's known. Friends of Terry, including but not limited to Dee Dee Spicer, bought prepaid phones in the weeks after Kyron vanished. At least one friend used a fake name to purchase a phone. These phones were AT&T phones purchased at Lloyd Center Mall. Friends later said they bought them because Verizon service didn't work consistently at Terry's rural home, and they believed their normal phones were being monitored. They wanted privacy as the media pressure intensified. One friend said she regretted the decision and turned everything over, including phone records and emails, to investigators. Investigators did recover at least one of those prepaid phones, but there has never been any public indication that the phones contained evidence of criminal activity. In the days and weeks after Kyron disappeared, some of Terry's actions and reactions drew scrutiny, both from the public and from Kyron's parents. What follows is a look at what was reported, what Terry has said in response, and what remains unconfirmed. Terry has said she wanted to speak publicly about the case, but that she was advised not to. She said, quote, "I was advised by law enforcement, by attorneys, not to say anything. I've asked multiple times to speak out and have not been allowed." This aligns with what often happens in high-profile investigations. Police may ask family members to stay quiet, to protect the integrity of interviews, or avoid influencing public tips. On the night of June 4th, all four parents, Kane and Terry and Desiree and her husband Tony, were gathered together at the Horman home while police conducted their initial investigation. Tony Young, who is a police detective, said that he was trying to prepare the family for what comes with a major missing child investigation. He said, quote, "I explained to each person that now our lives are not private anymore, that the investigators are going to want to know very detailed information about our lives." Tony said that he noticed that Terry seemed uncomfortable with that idea, describing her as feeling persecuted early on. In his opinion, it was an unusual reaction. Another source of criticism came from Terry's Facebook activity. 4 days after Kyron vanished, she posted that she was, quote, "hitting the gym." Many in the public found the comment inappropriate for a parent in crisis. Terry later said investigators specifically told the family to continue their routines as normally as possible, which was confirmed by early statements from Captain Mike Schultz, who told the family to stick to their normal routines. Terry said, quote, "Law enforcement told us to do things we would normally do. So they want you to go grocery shopping. They want you to go to the gym. They actually specifically told Kane and I, and he was with me that day when we went." Her Facebook page was later made private. Another source of public criticism came from court documents filed during Terry and Kane's separation. In July 2010, Kane filed papers claiming Terry began an intimate relationship with his high school friend Michael Cook, that she shared legal information with him, gave him enough details to identify Kane's new address, and attempted to kidnap their daughter from the gym's daycare when Kane was working out on June 28th, although Terry has never been charged with any crime related to that allegation. The filings also stated that Terry and Cook exchanged explicit messages on June 30th, less than a month after Kyron disappeared and within 4 days of Kane filing for divorce and a restraining order against her. Cook had known Kane in high school, and the two reconnected later in Portland. After Kyron vanished, he helped organize the first vigil, helped bring food and mail to the Horman home, and said he was simply trying to support the family during a crisis. Terry later said the messaging was a reaction to her belief that Kane was also involved with someone else. She called it a moment of anger and retaliation, saying, quote, "I had no interest in having this person in my life. This was something to screw with Kane because I was angry with him because he was doing the exact same thing with somebody else." She also claimed that Cook entering her life was a setup, since he was Kane's friend, and that he was, quote, sent to the house. None of Terry's claims have been publicly verified. She also said that she and Kane were separated at that point, and that the messages were her way of coping. These explicit messages became widely discussed as they were released in court filings. And for many people, they raised questions about Terry's behavior in the early days of the investigation. But, like much of what surfaced through the divorce, this was separate from the criminal investigation itself. Another early element that drew public attention was Terry's series of polygraph exams, and those polygraph exams became one of the most discussed parts of the early investigation. It's been reported that Terry has failed 2 polygraphs and walked out in the middle of another one. According to Desiree and her husband Tony, the biggest question marks are surrounding Terry's whereabouts the morning Kyron disappeared. Kane, Desiree, and Tony have each said that they themselves took polygraph exams and were ruled out within several days. It's also been reported that there were, quote, indications of deception on Terry's first polygraph and inconsistencies in her initial timeline. In interviews, Terry said that she is almost completely deaf in her left ear and relies heavily on lip reading, which made it difficult for her to hear the examiner's questions when he sat behind her. Whether this affected the results is something only she can truly speak to. She also said she was exhausted, stressed, and had barely slept in the days after the disappearance. When she was told that she failed, she became upset and felt investigators were unfairly focusing on her. She said she briefly withdrew cooperation, but agreed to continue after speaking with the FBI lead investigator, who she said told her that her emotional reaction made him believe she was not guilty. She characterized the second test as rushed and said the third was too frustrating to continue. Terry also said she failed at least one question that she believed was poorly worded, specifically a question asking whether Kyron had been in her truck. She explained that she had driven him to school that morning, so technically he had been in the truck, but not after she dropped him off. In her view, there was no way to answer that question with a simple yes or no, which is why she believes it registered as deceptive. Her account has not been confirmed by investigators, and polygraph questions and scoring methods are not made public. Terry has said she felt the polygraphs were used to rattle her and to make her feel like a criminal. She also said, quote, "I think they already had settled on me to be their patsy." Her statements reflect her belief that law enforcement fixated on her early, while the statements from Kyron's parents suggest they believed the exams supported their growing suspicions. As I say anytime we talk about polygraphs, regardless of the outcome, polygraphs are not admissible in court. They are widely viewed as investigative tools rather than definitive truth tests. Because no official results have been released, no transcripts are public, and multiple accounts contradict one another, the polygraph exams remain an unresolved and heavily debated part of the case. They contribute to the theory because of how they shaped family members' perceptions, but they do not constitute verified evidence of guilt or innocence. The public perception of Terry changed dramatically in the weeks following Kyron's disappearance, not because of evidence released by law enforcement, but because of a rapid succession of public-facing events: divorce filings, court statements, media interviews, and civil proceedings. Because the criminal investigation remains sealed, the public still does not know how much, if any, of these claims align with what investigators actually found. Here are the key factors that shaped the public narrative. When Kane filed for divorce, he included the landscaper's claim that Terry had attempted to hire him to kill Kane months earlier. Law enforcement has indicated they consider the landscaper credible, but the claim has never been tested in court. Even without public evidence, the allegation made national headlines and instantly reshaped how many people viewed Terry. Interviews with Kyron's parents and step-parent played a major role in shaping public opinion. Desiree, Tony, and Kane all spoke publicly about their concerns regarding Terry. Because they were the people closest to Kyron, and because they may have been shown information that has never been publicly released, their statements have carried significant weight. Their interviews reflected not only their emotions as grieving parents, but also whatever insight they gained through their direct contact with investigators. And since the official case file remains sealed, the public doesn't know what private evidence or discussions may have informed their perspectives. These statements strongly influenced how the case was understood outside law enforcement, especially in the absence of official detailed findings from investigators. Adding to that, a 2005 DUI involving Terry driving under the influence with her older son in the car resurfaced in news coverage. Although unrelated to Kyron's disappearance, it shaped how some people viewed Terry's judgment and decision-making. Despite years of public speculation and intense media coverage, Terry Horman has never been named a suspect or person of interest in Kyron's disappearance. She has also never been charged with any crime related to the case. There are several possible reasons for this, based on what has been shared publicly. According to comments made by Terry's father, she underwent multiple interviews lasting up to 6 hours each. The white Ford F-250 she drove the morning Kyron disappeared was reportedly examined twice. Investigators have not released the results of those interviews or searches, nor have they indicated publicly that they found physical evidence of a crime. Some observers, including local journalists, believe detectives were applying pressure in hopes that Terry might share information or that someone close to her might come forward. Kaya Libashi, a local Portland reporter, summarized it this way, quote, "They've been slowly applying the pressure throughout this entire investigation, alienating her from her friends and family. They want Terry Horman to feel alone and potentially be cooperative in some way." This reflects a common investigative strategy in cases where police have suspicions but lack sufficient evidence to bring charges. Desiree Young has stated that Terry gave inconsistent accounts and different versions of her timeline. She said investigators shared these concerns with her, though law enforcement has not confirmed any specifics publicly. Because the case file is sealed, the public does not know which statements investigators found inconsistent, what they were able to corroborate, or how heavily Terry's account factored into their ongoing investigation. Without access to law enforcement's findings, it's impossible to know whether inconsistencies, if they exist, are the product of stress, misunderstanding, normal memory gaps, or possibly something much more sinister. For prosecutors to file charges, they need probable cause, evidence that can withstand scrutiny, and a reasonable likelihood of conviction. To date, no such evidence has been presented publicly. That doesn't mean the evidence does or does not exist, only that nothing has moved the case toward an arrest. When asked why she believes she has never been charged, Terry has said, quote, "Because they have exonerating evidence they have not shown the public and they should come forth with what they know." When asked what she believes happened to Kyron, Terry has said she thinks someone entered the school and took him from inside the building. She has also described an incident that she says occurred the day before Kyron disappeared. A man in a white pickup truck reportedly parked near a nearby 7-Eleven and behaved suspiciously, asking employees where the nearest school was. Terry said an employee contacted police and showed them surveillance footage, though no law enforcement agency has ever publicly confirmed this account or released any records related to it. It is unknown whether investigators considered this information relevant or credible, or if Terry's claim about this unidentified man is accurate at all. Like every theory in this case, the idea that Terry harmed or abducted Kyron comes with unresolved questions and logistical challenges. None of these points prove or disprove Terry's involvement. They simply highlight areas where public information is incomplete or contradictory. The theory that Terry harmed Kyron requires her to transport him, either alive, incapacitated, or deceased, while also taking her 18-month-old to 2 Fred Meyer stores and the gym. Surveillance footage from those stores has never been released, although Andrea Leckie did confirm seeing Terry at one of those stores that morning. But what investigators ultimately confirmed, how those errands could intersect with a concealed abduction or disposal of a body, remains one of the most debated logistical issues in this case. Some speculate that Terry may have handed Kyron off to Dee Dee during a period when Dee Dee was reportedly unaccounted for. Dee Dee has consistently denied involvement and cooperated to the point of receiving an immunity offer. Even with immunity, she did not implicate herself or Terry. Online discussions have long speculated that Kyron may have been hidden or buried on the family property. However, Kane himself has said the property was searched more extensively than even the school grounds, with no publicly reported findings. Another question often raised is, why would a friend help dispose of a child, an act that would carry extreme legal and moral consequences? No motive for such assistance has ever been publicly identified. Together, these points show why this theory has remained highly contested. Public opinion remains sharply divided about Terry's role in Kyron's disappearance. Some believe she was involved based on her behavior, the allegations raised during the divorce, and statements from Kyron's parents. Others believe she became the focus of suspicion early and unfairly, and has lived under that shadow ever since. What is clear is that all 4 parents, Kane, Desiree, Tony, and Terry, all agree on one critical point. They believe Kyron was taken from inside the school. Who took him, why, and what happened in the hours when his absence went unnoticed remain the central unanswered questions that have defined this case for nearly 15 years. As the 15-year anniversary of Kyron's disappearance approached, there was a significant development behind the scenes. Detectives from the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office and Gresham Police revealed that they have been digitizing and reorganizing the entire case file. Thousands of pages of reports, interviews, timelines, lab work, and photos. This is a massive undertaking, but it also gives investigators something they haven't had in years: a fully searchable and streamlined case file for fresh review. Once the digitizing phase is complete, the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit will re-examine the case. Multnomah County DA Nathan Vasquez and his office will participate, and investigators will reassess the timelines, conflicting statements, and all witness accounts. DA Vasquez released a statement saying, quote, "My office has begun a thorough and methodical review of the case with fresh eyes, and we look forward to receiving further analysis from the Sheriff's Office and the FBI. Our focus remains where it has always belonged, on Kyron and his family." This tells us 2 very important things. Kyron's case is not cold, and they believe there is more work to do, and potentially more to uncover. Kyron's disappearance also led to major changes in Portland public schools. Today, visitors must enter through one locked, monitored door, sign in on a district system before receiving a badge, wear visible photo ID while on campus, and expect staff to challenge anyone out of place. Additionally, every PPS elementary school now has indoor and outdoor surveillance cameras. High schools are being rebuilt with updated security systems, and some campuses have designated campus security agents. And now, possibly most importantly, robocalls are immediately issued when a child is marked absent, something that did not happen the day Kyron disappeared, something that could have completely changed the outcome of this case. These changes were made specifically so that what happened to Kyron on June 4th, 2010 can never happen again. In the years following Kyron's disappearance, Terry attempted to have her name legally changed to avoid the, quote, stigma of the Horman name, but was unsuccessful, with the judge citing the ongoing investigation. She eventually remarried and was granted permission to legally change her last name to her husband's last name, Vasquez. She has been reported to reside in California. She maintains her innocence and that she has nothing to do with Kyron's disappearance. Desiree and Kane remain dedicated to finding their son. They continue speaking publicly, supporting missing child initiatives, and keeping Kyron's name alive. The Kyron Horman Foundation, created in 2010, is still active and focuses on raising awareness for Kyron and other missing children. Both Desiree and Kane honor Kyron in their own ways. Desiree created a space in her backyard that she calls Kyron's Pad. It's filled with frog statues, solar lights, and decorations. A tribute to the red-eyed tree frog, the subject of the science fair project he was so proud of. She said, quote, "Kyron is a sweet little boy that just wanted to live his life and go camping and fishing, be a kid, and that got taken away from him. The pain of 15 years without answers is something she describes as, quote, still hard, but we talk about it all the time where it's just some days are rougher than others." And Kane continues to hold on to the only thing that keeps many families going. Quote, "There's no clear information that tells us one way or another as far as whether he's still alive or not. There's no definitive information that says he isn't, and in my mind, we have to keep looking for him." A $50,000 reward remains available for information leading to answers in Kyron's disappearance. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released an age progression image of what Kyron may look like now as an adult. If you know anything, even something you think might be insignificant, contact the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office tip line at 503-988-0560. Send an email to tips@mcso.us. You can also contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST, or submit information online through the NCMEC Cyber Tip Line. Even after 15 years, one tip could change everything. I'll continue following this renewed investigation closely. If and when new information is released, I'll cover it here. So make sure you're subscribed or follow the podcast if you want to stay up to date on Kyron's case and other cases as well. I'd really like to hear your thoughts. What do you think happened to Kyron? Do you believe one of these theories fits? Or do you think there's another possibility altogether? Let me know in the comments. I always appreciate hearing your perspectives. And if you're looking for the next episode to check out, I recommend my episode on Lily and Jack Sullivan, the Canadian siblings who disappeared in May 2025 under highly complicated and heartbreaking circumstances. Thanks for being here, thanks for caring, and I'll see you in the next episode.